everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome too. This is going to be part 2 to how you make the jeans to corset upcycle, because honestly I needed to redeem myself after that last video because I made so many mistakes, but I pray that this one comes out even better than the last. If you want to learn how to make the pattern, I suggest you check out my last video because I won't be doing that in this one. This time I'm just going to alter my pattern and go straight for it, so I'm going to try and give it a bit more like detailed instructions on how you do certain things. So stay tuned and I hope you enjoy the video.
Oh, kill him, oh. Okay.
So to start it all off, I just assembled my pattern. Now this is the pattern that I made in my video last week. I just made it digital and then I sewed it up in a sample, made any alterations, and then whatever I changed I just did the same on my pattern basically, so that I had my final drafted pattern. So here I'm just folding my lining piece in half and tracing my pattern pieces onto it. I'm using a water soluble marker again so that when I wash it with water it will just come off. And then you're going to want to like iron all your pieces flat so that it makes it easier to cut, and then just cut them out. Again, I use the same system of labeling one side of the corset A and one side of the corset B, and this just makes it easier to know which pieces go with each other. I also marked the corners of the pattern, so because my seam allowance was 1 centimeter, I measured 1 centimeter down so that I could find like a crossing point. And that just makes it easier to match up the pieces together when you're sewing. And so if you've marked your seam allowance correctly and stuff, when you open out your pieces, the guidelines that we made should match up. And that's how you know that your corset is being assembled properly. So you're going to want to assemble pieces 1A to 2A, then 3A to 4A. Then this bit you can choose to do it how you want, but you can either attach 4A and 3A to 5A, or you can attach 1A and 2A to 3 and 4, and then put 5 on. This pattern has really curvy pieces which can make it tricky to put together, but a little trick is to just, when you're sewing it, you want to put the curvier side piece on top and kind of just maneuver it under the sewing machine as you're sewing, if you're confident enough to go ahead without pins like me. If not, I would suggest that you sew with pins so that your curves go in correctly, because that will affect the whole fit of your garment if you don't do that properly. So once I finished assembling all my pieces of one side of the corset, I did the same to the other, and then once you've done that, you're going to want to take both sides, pieces 1A and 1B, and just do the straight stitch down the center. So once you've sewn the corset up, we're going to move to the back pieces, and the back pieces are really simple. There's only 3, and you just want to sew pieces 3B to 2B and then 2B to 1B, and then obviously do the same to side A, but don't sew up the center back because that's where we're going to get in and out of the corset. So now that we've got the front and the back of our corset assembled, they'll be in 2 separate pieces. We're going to want to sew the side seams so that they form one big corset. The way how I've done my pattern, 4B and 5B joined together to make the side seam, but obviously it depends on how you've done your style lines. So you're just going to want to sew up those 2 sides with a straight stitch. So once I had my lining assembled, I did one more test fit. Obviously we can't really close up the back properly, but I kind of just wrapped it around my body to see if I was happy with how everything fits, and I was. So it was time to move on to unpicking our jeans. So I just went ahead and started unpicking the waistband because that's what we're going to use to seal the edge of the corset. Then I unpicked the side seams, so you can unpick it if you want to, but that's long, as you can see. Like, I hate unpicking, so I decided to use scissors and just cut down the side. But one thing that I want to say is, when you're upcycling, it's best to kind of just salvage pieces. So for example, the zip in these jeans, you might want to take it out so that you can use it for another project. Then I just started to lay my pieces on the leg, and you want to obviously be strategic again about how you place them, avoiding any wrinkles or like worn out bits of the jeans, and then cut them out. But because obviously both sides of the jeans are different, we're going to want to flip our pattern pieces this time so that you know, they're the same on both sides, and it should look like this. So now I'm just going to assemble my pieces. I've done the markings again on both of my pieces, and I'm just going to line them up. I found this from my granddad or my nan's old stash of threads, but I think I'm going to use this for the top stitching when I do the boning because I don't have a lot. So I've sewn up the main fabric in the corset and the two backs. Now I'm just going to sew up the side seams, so it'd be A sides with A sides and B sides with B sides. So once I finished assembling all my pieces, I took them to the iron and just gave them a good press. I decided to press the seam allowances to one side, but you can choose to have them open, which is when you just open out the middle and press it flat. But you know, if your fabric's really thick, I would recommend that you trim your seams down, but mine was kind of thin, so I left it. Also, you're going to want to trim your seams, like cut notches into the curvy ones, because that will just allow your corset to lay more flattering, I don't know. The tension will be released basically, so it'll just fit your body a bit nicer and won't have wrinkles and stuff. Once I ironed everything, I just cleaned up the edge of the corset, so any seam allowances that may have been sticking out, I just trimmed it so that it follows a nice clean shape. Then I also sewed my label onto my lining, because this would be the step that you do that, because the next thing to do is attach the lining and the main fabric together. Something I need to add is that whatever you do to one, you need to do to the other, because these pieces are to be identical, because they're going to get sewn together. So the next thing to do is to attach the main fabric to the lining, and what you're going to want to do is put the pieces right sides facing each other, and we're going to sew a straight stitch all along the top. So I've just finished stitching along the top here, and now I'm just going to flip it. So all my seam lines match up along the whole length of the corset, and that's exactly what you want. Once I did that straight stitch, I just opened it up and pressed it so that all the seam allowances were facing towards the lining, and then I did a top stitch just so that the lining stays behind the main fabric and that it doesn't peek through. If yours isn't laying flat, again I would say trim the seam, because it might just need tension releasing. So now it's time for us to move on to the boning, and what I'm doing is I'm matching the center seam of the main fabric to the lining center seam, and I'm just pinning it together so that I can create my boning channel. So like in my last video, I'm using the same boning, and the width that I need to do is 1 centimeter. So I'm going to sew 0.5 centimeters on either side of the center line seam, and you just want to do that for the rest of your style lines. I don't wanna walk around knowing it was your fault, 'cause being the man that I am, I just can't lose my cool. Just like I was doing when I was top stitching, I'm gonna kind of pull it a little bit just so that I can make sure that my fabric is taut and my line stays in the middle. So now it's time to put the boning into the channels, and again you're going to want to file the edge so that it's nice and round so that it won't poke through your fabric and stuff. And then what I did, I kept mine attached, I kept my boning attached on the whole, you know, meters of it, and then I pushed it through once I filed the top, and then I just snipped it so that I did less wastage of the boning basically. Then once I inserted all my boning pieces, I just marked 1 centimeter up on all of them and then cut it and filed it to make it round, because we're going to need a little bit of space to sew the waistband as the bias binding on. So now I'm just pinning one of the waistbands to the center part of the corset, and I'm going to stop around the side seam area, just there. And then I've got these extra other bits from the other side, obviously it has some other writing on, but I'm going to use the length that doesn't. And I'm just going to do the same thing on both sides, but I'm going to connect these up at the side seams like I did in my last video. As you can see, this is going over it. That's just because the waistband has this line on it here which I don't want, so I'm just going to start sewing about here. I'm lining up this line to the edge of the foot, and then I'm just going to sew following that line there. So then I just connected the waistband pieces at the side seam, just so that when I fold it over, all the lines will be running smooth in one straight line. And then I just pinned the bias binding to the bottom of the corset, but because in my fitting I realised that I'm going to need to cut a little bit off, so I kind of stopped at that line because we're going to need to insert a zipper. Now this is the reason why it took me so long to upload this video, because the zipper just took so long to come. But all I'm doing is just measuring how long I need it to be, and mine was too long, so I had to kind of, you know, trim it. And if you're gonna trim a zipper, please watch a video on how you do it, because you need to have a stopper obviously at the top so that the zipper pull doesn't come off. But I'll try and link a video in the description that shows you how to do that. So what I'm doing is just lining my zipper up with the markings that I made, where it will fit me. Unzip it and put them with their respective parts. So when I was pinning the zipper, I kind of pinned it so that the zipper teeth were over the line, because when we fold it over, the zipper is essentially an extension. So I just made sure that the zipper teeth were over, and once I pinned that in place, I obviously carried on pinning the bias binding up until the line, and then I stopped sewing at the line. Please make sure to back stitch so that your stitches don't come undone. So this is what it should look like once you've sewn your bias binding, and the zipper teeth should basically be going over that a little bit, if you can see in this video shot right here. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change my sewing machine foot to a zipper foot, and I'm gonna sew as close as I can to the zipper teeth from the top of the zip right down to the bottom. Then I just trimmed away any excess material that I had, and I trimmed the seam allowance of the bias binding just so that I could fold it over as small as possible, because I think it just looks a lot nicer and sleek, I guess. And then I'm just folding it over the zip so that everything stays secure. Now once you've folded your bias binding over, you're going to want to stitch in the ditch. Stitching in the ditch is obviously just a stitch that you'll see on the inside but not on the outside, because we're going to sew right in the center of that seam line that we made. So I decided to do a hand stitch, so I just folded all the fray edges in, and then I just did like a quick invisible or a whip stitch, whatever you want, just to make the inside nice and flush. So I just used gem tack to like stick all these rhinestones down. It's just a glue basically that will wash off, but just to keep that in place I'm gonna use invisible thread. Why is my voice like that? I'm gonna use invisible thread, the white one, to just like do a couple stitches on every single row of rhinestones, and then it should be done. I just recorded the bucket hat final reveal, hence the reason why I'm wearing this. But thank you so much for watching this video, my part 2. I hope that I've redeemed myself and that I make it a bit more clearer to understand. If not, again, let me know so that I can try and make my tutorials a bit more better and clearer. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope that I see you next time. Bye. And one final message is just a thank you to Darkville Productions for editing the sound on this video.